Awesome. So I think we should just start by each of our panelists telling a little bit about themselves. So we have Professor Susan Cooper, Professor Denise Stefano, Professor Drogin, and Julia Wexler. And if each of you could just say 2 minutes about what you've done in your career and then what you do now at Mercy College. So maybe Professor Cooper, if you could start.
Sure, no problem. So my name is Susan Cooper. My background is in marketing, and what most people don't know, also IT a little bit. I started my career in IT. My undergrad was in psychology and computer science, and I worked for 3.5 years as a database analyst coming out of school undergrad. And I decided it really wasn't for me, so I made a shift and I went to graduate school at that time. I went to Northwestern, to Kellogg, where I actually didn't go there for marketing. It happens to be a great marketing school, but I actually fell in love with marketing when I was there. And I landed in my internship. We had 2 years of graduate school. My first summer, I landed an internship at Nabisco, and I went to Nabisco for my first job for the first 2 or 3 years out of school. And then I made a shift to a company called Best Foods, which ultimately became Unilever. And I stayed there for I was there at Best Foods for about 13 years. I was at Unilever for not that much longer than that, not that long. I decided it wasn't for me. And I kind of changed gears and I went to the consulting side of the business. And I did that for 15 years or so, working with a lot of big companies, Safeway and Clorox and Neutrogena, brands that you know, a lot of work with Unilever. And about 5 years ago, I made the jump into academia. The industry was changing greatly and I decided to make a change. And that's what brings me here. So I teach marketing, I teach management, I teach presentations and personal branding. And that's me in a nutshell.
Awesome, thank you. Professor Drogin?
Mute, yes.
We can hear you.
Great. So nice to see you all. And also, Susan, you forgot to say that you bake, which is one of your wonderful talents. Very creative baker, that one over there. So we're all a mix of professional and personal. And I think that's what helps to make you well-rounded and keep you sane, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm Victoria Drogin. I began my career after being an English major, undergraduate. I went to law school, some of my students know, because my dad made me. He said, what are you going to do with an English degree? Open a Shakespeare store? So he said, you will go to law school. And I did. And I was never sorry. Didn't love many things about it, but did love the communication aspect of it and the persuasion and negotiation aspect of it. And I was a lawyer for almost 20 years before I went into consulting through executive team management, team development, organizational behavior. As an attorney, I went back to NYU for organizational behavior and team development, and in their School of Continuing Studies. And while I was there, I was fascinated by the discipline of life coaching, which is basically how as individuals we are successful, both professionally and personally. So I wound up getting a double certification from NYU in executive coaching and training and also life coaching, and consulted for a number of years before accidentally finding my way into education when the market crashed in 2008 and 2009, and there were a lot of young graduates who were coming out into the work world very scared about the prospect of finding jobs. And there were a lot of executives and professionals in the large companies that I worked with at L'Oreal, at large tech companies, who were laid off. So all of a sudden, everything switched from the corporate perspective to the individual perspective, how to get jobs, how to retool, and how to build the next phase of people's lives. So that's what I did as a consultant for many years. And then in education, brought a lot of that to my students. First at Hofstra Law School as the Associate Dean and Dean for Professional Development, and then through connections, always connections and networks, wound up at Mercy when they rebuilt the business school. And I teach organizational leadership. I teach in the MSOL graduate program. I'm the director of the business professional cohort, which is all freshmen declared business majors. And I teach emotional intelligence, personal branding, and communication skills. And that's it in a very big nutshell.
Awesome. Hopefully we can talk more about a lot of those changes, but it would be great if Professor Stefano could talk a little bit about her background.
Sure. Well, I have a little bit of a different background, I suppose. I did not start out my career wanting to be a CPA or an accountant, which I am right now. But I was very, very into music during high school. I was writing music, and I entered a contest actually where one of my songs got recognized, and I was awarded a small record contract with a new record company. When I was about 16 years old. I was unable to sign that contract. So of course my parents had to get involved and did not think it was a good thing for me to do. So we never signed the contract, which I was, very, very upset about. But I continued to, try to pursue my music career. I actually got admitted to Berklee School of Music, which is a very, very, very prominent school for music in Massachusetts. And at the last minute, I pulled the string and said, I don't know that I want to go to college right now. So I went out to work and found myself in accounting because that's where I wound up. I wound up in a bookkeeping job, found that it was just a very natural, natural thing for me, and decided that I wasn't really going to get anywhere unless I went back to school. So I put myself back through school. I did what a lot of students do here, where they work full time and they're going to school trying to better themselves. Well, I was there. I did it many, many years. I finally received my undergraduate degree and went to work for Arthur Andersen, which was one of the top accounting firm at the time. So I worked for Arthur Andersen for a number of years. And then I did some work in private practice. I was a CFO for a small education company, and I went to work for a spin-off company of Deloitte. And during my time there at that spin-off company, I consulted at Pepsi for about 3 years. And I was also the director of our Stanford practice of that spin-off company as well too. And at that time, I was also completing my master's degree. So I completed my master's degree in finance and financial management. And the reason that I did that is because I always wanted to teach. I used to tutor a lot when I was in college. I loved teaching and letting the bright light go off and people learning from my own experiences. So as soon as I got that master's degree, I started sending letters out to my alma mater, which is Iona College, and some other institutions. And Iona hired me to teach a graduate level course there, and it kind of catapulted my career into academics. So I was actually teaching along while I was working for the Deloitte spinoff and consulting at Pepsi and doing all those things. And then I got a call from the chair of the accounting program here at Mercy College, now in the provost office, Lucretia Mann, saying that they had a faculty member who backed out of a government not-for-profit accounting course, and would I be interested in teaching it? And could I teach it? And I said, well, I think I could teach anything, right? So they gave me the course. I did well, and the rest is history. I started full-time here in 2004. So I've been working here for now, I guess, what is that? Simple mathematics, big accounting problems I could do, simple mathematics, right? 16 years, I guess. So I'm the chair of the department now. I've been the chair for 9 years. And I teach a host of accounting classes, mostly upper level junior and senior classes right now. But I've taught them all pretty much over my years here at Mercy College. Love teaching, love being with the students, and glad to be here today. So thank you for having me.
Awesome. We're so happy to have you here. And then Julia, if you could give us a little bit of background about you, that would be awesome.
Sure. So first of all, how fortunate are we to have all of these amazing people on our faculty? Every time I listen, I learn new things about all of you. So I'm very grateful to be on this team, really. And you students should, while you're here, tap into us, because there's a lot that we all bring to the table, in case it's not obvious. So I was a psychology major and I wanted to be a psychologist. Undergrad, Albany University, waitressed every single summer to pay for my master's at Columbia from Teachers College, probably the toughest job I ever had and the job I learned the most from. And graduated from Columbia, ready to be a psychologist, landed on Wall Street, having never taken a business class, didn't know a stock from a bond. Started recruiting, and it was nothing but a sheer uphill climb in terms of being really fun and really lucrative. I learned the difference between a stock and a bond on the job, and still come at business from a perspective of feeling like I don't belong here because I never really did take a business class. So I know that's one of the themes with many of you that you'll find as you step into your first jobs. You kind of feel like, I don't know how I landed this, but I'm sure I'm going to get fired. And I had that feeling for the first 2 years of my career. And then the next 20, I was the #1 female headhunter. So don't ever feel like you don't belong. We all feel that way. And you're supposed to be learning new things and stepping into situations that you know nothing about. That's called learning. And that's what your career ascension is supposed to be. So after I did the Wall Street thing, I ran my own executive search firm, had my second child, and I couldn't go to Hong Kong anymore. So I did my own business. Then I went back to Columbia and I got my career coaching, advanced intensive master training, and started doing career coaching instead of executive search. My youngest daughter went off to college, and Mercy College was down the road. And I walked in and applied for the job. Was told I probably couldn't do it in the beginning, and then was hired. And so far, it's been a great experience to bring the coaching and the headhunting, Wall Street headhuntress experience to you all. And my job, as you all know, is to bring in employers that open up jobs and internships for you all. So thanks for having me today.
Yeah, of course. So let's kind of dive right into more of the panel style questions. So today we're here to talk about adaptability, and not only because, you know, during these times things are constantly changing, but also because in a survey from the National Association of Colleges and Employers, they actually found that 58% of employers see adaptability and flexibility as one of the most valuable skills in job candidates. So this is actually a really great time to flex that adaptability muscle. And we know that adaptability is a skill. It's something that we can develop and nurture. So I want to ask each of our panelists today, how have you flexed your adaptability muscle throughout your career? And has it been something that has come easy to you, or has it been challenging?
I'll start there if you can, because I can think of something right off the top of my head.
Perfect.
When I mentioned before that I had been working before and then went to school and then went back to work for Arthur Andersen. So having to adapt and come back down to a staff level when I had already been working as an accounting manager, with the company, was very difficult transition for me. So what I wound up having in the first year was challenging for me to be able to kind of adapt to. I have to think like a staff person and not think like a manager. And it's kind of like how you're trained in the accounting firms, where you come up kind of through, I hate to say it, you come up through this caste system, so to speak. So what I wound up doing is getting myself aligned with some of the managers and the senior managers in the firm. I had a pretty significant background in the automobile business, and a job came into Arthur Andersen where at the time these automobile retail dealers were rolling up and going public and becoming these conglomerate companies. And I just so happened to have a relationship with one of the senior managers. She was going to be partner. She actually wound up making partner the next year. But she remembered me, and she said, "Oh, Denise Stefano would be the perfect person to run that job." And I remember people there saying, "Yeah, but she's only a senior. She's only been here for 2 or 3 years." And she said, "Trust me, this woman can handle it." And they wound up giving me the job, and everything wound up working out. And even when I was going to leave Arthur Andersen, they wanted me to stay, and you're going to get skipped, you'll be manager, this, that, and the other thing. I decided to leave at that point in time. But I really had to be able to put myself in a different type of role when I went there. It was challenging, but I knew that if I didn't do it, I wasn't going to get to the end goal and the result that I wanted, where I was going to get the experience I needed in a big firm, the top firm at the time, and then be able to become a CPA. So I took a back seat, but it allowed me to take, 10 leaps forward.
So I can jump in here with mine, because mine was a little bit different in terms of how I adapted. From straight on out of graduate school, the company I worked for was taken over, corporate acquisition. And I actually went through 7 corporate acquisitions during my entire career. So 3 weeks into Nabisco, KKR came along and bought the company, and it was the largest buyout in corporate history at that time. And I saw some things happen, which I had no control of. And it was very, very scary. I have to tell you, it was very scary. And I realized that I'm 3 weeks in, and I have student loans to pay, and I have I have rent to pay, and I had certain things I had to grow up all of a sudden. And it was very, very scary. I actually saw one of my colleagues who came in at the same day I did, 3 weeks earlier. She was escorted out of the building, only for the reason being that she was associated with a person who was associated with the CEO. His name was Jack Welch. He was actually the Jack Welch that you're thinking of from GM, a very well-known business manager who turned GM around. This was pre-GM, General Electric, sorry, pre-GE, and she was his niece. And anybody who's related to Jack Welch, because Jack Welch was friends with the CEO who's being taken out, everybody was taken out at that point, whoever had a relationship with him. So that to me was like an eye-opener. I mean, I was in my 20s. I was like, wow, how could this possibly happen? This only happens in the movies. But I realized that, what was going on around me, and that I needed to have that goal in mind of where I wanted to take this to for myself. And I stuck with it, and I persevered, and I made it through for a few years at Nabisco. But I have to tell you, I think you need to know yourself really well. I think you need to know when you want to adapt and when you just don't want to adapt, when it's just not going to work for you. And start getting your plans in place when that happens. So another corporate acquisition came along. I was at Best Foods for 13 years. We had a lot of different companies trying to acquire us along those 13 years. There was a poison pill in our constitution, and they couldn't do it. And along came our next door neighbor, which was Lipton Unilever. Knocked on the door, and they just offered a price that couldn't be resisted. So the CEO had to take the offer. And I sat back, and I knew a little bit about Unilever at the time. Great company, but like I said, you have to know yourself. I was working in a company at a pretty decent level at Best Foods, where I had a lot of latitude. I had a lot of say in what I was doing, and I liked that. And I didn't think I could have the same thing at Unilever, because I saw it was a much bigger company. It was run differently. It was just a different place. And some of my friends said they jumped on board and said, yay, I'm staying, I'm moving ahead. I stayed for a short while, and I said, you know what? It's not really for me. And I really need to make the move to another place. So I think when it comes to adaptability, I think you really have to know who you are and have that end goal in mind of what you're looking for, and say, can I work this out? Can this work together? And that's really a big part of it, because not everything always works out, and that's okay. You just have to know when you need to adapt. But you don't always have to adapt to the situation, but how do you change the situation to work better with you?
Great.
I'll just add one more thing. In terms of what's happening now, many of you may have jobs. Many of you may have thought you were having jobs that don't any longer exist. Many of you may have had your jobs retracted. The way you adapt now to something that is historic in your generation and in ours, and has never happened before, ever, and hopefully will never happen again, will define you very early on in your career. Because you can bet that the first interview question you're going to be getting from employers when you start interviewing again, and you will be, what did you do during the downtime? How did you handle it? What they're really asking is, what did you make happen? And how do you handle adversity? Everybody can write on their resume, I'm tenacious and persistent and adaptable. But until you, hold on, my dog's gonna go crazy and bark. All right. Until you really think about what are the problems that you can be solving right now. In any one of our backgrounds, the way we adapted was to figure out, here's the problem. Here's how I've got to solve it. I may solve it a completely non-traditional way, right? So when I went to Wall Street, I didn't have a business background. They needed to place people. I placed people without having a business background. I figured out how to do it because I talked to them and listened and I didn't lie, and they wound up going and I wound up getting big commissions. So think about the problems that you're seeing right now. Companies are having big problems. The recruiters are losing their jobs in many instances. Think about how you can adapt your skills to figure out which companies need you. Don't apply to United Airlines, right? Probably not. But maybe apply to a healthcare company in an accounting area. I'm just talking top of my head because healthcare is having a huge, huge crisis, and you can actually be part of solutions and part of helping. And you can say, you know what, I saw that people needed food, so I organized a food drive with other peers of mine, and we volunteered and we dropped off food to the essential workers at a hospital. Just an example. So I'm taking the adaptability right now with what's going on and what each of you can really think about. Instead of thinking, how is this affecting me? Think about how it's affecting the whole economy. And take a shot at thinking about how you can adapt your approach. Maybe what you thought was going to happen isn't happening. Many, many, many people still need you to help them solve their problems. So adapt and think about how you can do that.
If I
Great.
could just add, just before we move on to your point, Julia, I think you have to be willing to just do whatever the job calls for when you go into the job. I wasn't happy ticking and tying SEC 10Q and 10K reports that I felt were completely below me when I went to Arthur Andersen, but I had to do it in order to get to where I eventually wanted to be. So sometimes you kind of have to bite the bullet to make that next step forward. So you need to keep that in mind.
Great, absolutely. So this question's for Victoria. So when you face a change, is there a process that you use to accept and move on with that change? If so, what has your process been in your past experience?
So there are a number of processes which you can use to accept change. And you know, in terms of resources to support yourself through change, there are many good ones, and we can get them to you afterwards. But I want to combine the last question with this question because the concepts go together. Natalie Fratto has a TED Talk, and Gina and her team will get you that information after this call. And she talks about adaptability in terms of 3 concepts, and they, if you can absorb them, will help you to move through change. She's sort of the culmination of Angela Duckworth's research on grit and resilience and how to go after your goals with passion. And even before that, some of my students will know we talked about Carol Dweck and mindset and having a growth mindset. All of that is part of this. What Natalie Fratto has done is she's created an adaptability quotient, which is sort of like IQ and EQ, but it's the next stage. And it's what in Julia's old field, a lot of employers look for in terms of adaptability. She's a tech investor, and she's constantly assessing the viability of startup companies. And what she looks for is people who do 3 things. And these are things that we can use to become stronger when we process through change. The first is to ask yourself what if questions. In other words, not what is, which is very important as well. We have to be very grounded when we look at the current reality. What is going on? Once you nail that down, the question is what if? What if something else was possible? And I'll give you an example of that. Before I came to Mercy, when I started at Hofstra, there was no position that had to do with professional development. They created it for me. And it was a dean of professional development in the law school to help students get jobs in possibly the most challenging job market that I had ever seen. The students, however, did not want this support, but the law school made it mandatory. They said, you need to go through this curriculum, which, by the way, is not for credit and mandatory. So even though you have 5 courses where you're reading 600 pages a night and you're dying over constitutional law and whatever else you're doing there, you have to go to these professional development classes. And the students said, nope, we don't want it. And they circulated a petition to say, we don't want to be made to go to this before con law or torts or any of these classes that we have to take. So I would walk into these classes and these students would be, you know, on their computers, playing Farmville, you know, whatever, but they had to be there, right? So I was on the edge of really losing this program that I had just started. And without knowing any of this research about adaptability or anything strategic in terms of how to face it, I asked, what would make this program valuable to you? Start an advisory board. Students, tell me what you want. I'm here. I'm either going to have this job or I'm going to get fired from this job one way or the other. It doesn't, you know, what do you want since you have to be here anyway? And they started an advisory board that was based on that question, what is possible? What can we do? What else exists? So when you're confronted with circumstances that are looking pretty grim, like, okay, they don't want this program. This is not, you know, what else is possible? What can you change it into? What can you create it into? Which is, you know, the question starts, what if? So ask yourself, what if? You know, this semester, boy, did we all get taken for, you know, this train went off the rails, right? Well, what if I could make it something different? Now I have time that I didn't have. You know, like Julia said, what can I make this in terms of my personal brand? What experiences can I talk about? What results have I created? So that's the first one, what if? Number 2 is, what can you unlearn? And that has to do with growing your brain. And that's when people say, brush your teeth with your other hand, you know, do something that you didn't do. Find something that you think you know how to do really well and unlearn it. That creates adaptability. It exercises the muscle, right? So, you know, use your other hand, you know, take a walk in a different direction, anything where it's automatic or rote, unlearn it. This is Natalie Frado's second point. And the third one, she says, is focus on curiosity and exploration. So process by shifting from a reactive mind into a curious mind. What can I learn? What can I do? What's interesting here? What's new? And those 3 questions can help us work through feeling out of control. And one final thought about the process, and this comes from Angela Duckworth's research. She says, draw a line, and that line is your life. Here's the beginning, here's the end. And drop the points of the big events onto that line, okay? So you were born, right? You went to grade school, you started middle school, you started college, you know, you got your first job. Where does whatever you're facing now fall on that line? And that will help you to see it as a process of something that you will work through and get through. There'll be a lot on the other side and a lot that got you here, but it's just a point in a line. And that helps you to feel like you can adapt to change as well.
Great, thank you so much. So to change to our next topic, we're going to talk a little bit about emotional intelligence. So feel free to jump in, but as we know, emotional intelligence is the ability to perceive emotions, to access and generate emotions so as to assist thought. And it has been proven through various research studies that the more your IQ doesn't necessarily correlate to how successful you will be, but you also have to have high emotional intelligence. How would you might advise some students now to specifically, when they see themselves in like an external locus of control instead of an internal locus, how can you start to make that change? So just perceiving things like what is going on right now, how can people, students specifically, be kind of internalizing this and processing this in a way that's going to benefit them?
Gina, I'm going to take this.
Everybody off by ST. Oh, okay.
Go ahead,
Julie.
go ahead, Victoria. You go first. I knew we'd be like head to head on this. You go. I'm second.
Well, I'm curious, but the issue for me with this is control. So if you can't control the circumstances, the only thing we can control is our reaction. And I'll toss it back to all of you. you know, on that question, you know, what can you control, what can't you control?
Right.
So I'm going to dive a little bit into the granularity of what I hear from students and thinking about things and flipping the switch in your head to think about whatever comes out of your mouth, what's the agenda of the other person and how are they hearing it? So when you go to a job interview and you say from the beginning, what are the benefits? What are the vacation dates? What's the this, what's the that? My need, my need, my need. I need to, and when am I going to get hired? And what am I going to know? Of course, those are valid questions to have, but that's your agenda. You're leading with your agenda, right? What you want to be doing is being emotionally in tuned to who's on the other side of the table and what they're thinking and what they're going through and what their company's going through. So if you sail into a job interview right now and don't say anything about the situation at hand, the market at large, ask questions. How are you doing? Hope your family's doing well. You know, if there's no regard for the emotional interests of other people, if it's you're leading with your agenda, it's not going to work. Because the one student who actually sits down and says, wow, I see this is a really tough market. I hope you and your family are doing well. I noticed by doing some research that your stock, you know, tumbled 25%, which must be really difficult for everyone. But I see that it's already come back about 10%. So hopefully, you know, I'd be curious what you've done to keep morale strong. That's nothing about my agenda. That's how are you guys doing? Is that going to affect me? Of course it will. Because if the stock is continuing to plunge, chances are you don't have a job for very long, even if you get hired. So by being aware of asking questions that show you're curious about what's going on with the interviewer, with the organization, don't just lead with, I cannot believe that this epidemic is affecting me, right? It's affecting everyone. Don't ignore it. Figure out how you can ask smart questions, figure out how you can help, but most importantly, stay externally focused on who's in front of you, what's going on with them, and be emotionally compassionate and kind. That in this market will differentiate you a lot from people who are just kind of more selfishly thinking about, this is a bummer for me. It's a bummer for everyone.
So building off that point a little bit, I want to touch on self-motivation. So Professor Cooper and Professor Stefano, I'm wondering if you could touch on how you both maintain a healthy attitude and perspective, not only now, but also in your careers when you had to make those big shifts.
So one of the things that I do is and I know you hear this all the time and it sounds a little contrite, but I really try to maintain balance between my personal life and my work world. And it does all blur together. And while Professor Drogin brought up my cupcakes, they're actually a creative outlet for me. And they're something that I turn to. I mean, some of you guys don't know what they are. They're themed cupcakes that I just started kind of tinkering in when I was deciding to leave the consulting world. And I thought it was pretty interesting that that was where I wound up, in a very creative place. Because I'm, you know, I like to dabble, I paint a little bit, I do a little bit of things like that. And I tend to have a creative side to me, but I never really took it to a level of maybe I can make it into a business. And it never really got to be a business because I realized what I had to produce in terms of volume to make the money I wanted to make. But it gave me an outlet. It gave me a place to go just emotionally and to cope and to express myself. And I think that gives me, that always has, I see when I kind of get drawn back into it, it's when I'm under a lot of stress. And I tend to go back there just very naturally because I'm comfortable there. And I need that. It's my place. It's like my place. And I think everybody has to have my place someplace. Whether it's, you know, that you like to walk or you like to be with people or whatever it is that makes you happy. I think you need to know that about yourself and just naturally let yourself go there for some space for yourself. You know, it's hard. It's very hard when you're under a lot of stress. and knowing how to, like, you're going to have to navigate. You still have that goal in mind. You want to get here in your career. You want to keep moving forward, but somehow you've got to make the room for that balance. And it kind of just puts everything else in perspective when you do it. So you just see the world from a different side.
Great. Absolutely. And especially with students that are tuned in right now, if you don't know how to release that creative aspect of you, or struggling figuring out what your strengths are, or things like that, there are several assessments you can be taking, attending webinars like this, and just asking questions. So this is a great opportunity. Now, if we can go to Professor Drogin and answer that, and then we'll have a little bit of time to ask some questions. You can either unmute yourselves or ask your question in the chat box.
You have a question for me, or you wanted me to respond?
Yes, if you can please respond that.
Oh, okay. So, talking about emotional intelligence, what we're talking about here when we're talking about resilience is that self-regulation, self-management piece. Part of emotional intelligence is connecting with other people, and that's what Julia was talking about in terms of being outwardly focused. Part of resilience and adaptability is about how we manage ourselves. So there's two pieces to that emotional intelligence equation. One is the outward focused piece, and the other is how we deal with ourselves. Self-care, creative if you're creative. If you're not creative, maybe your outlet is something else. Like Gina was saying, maybe it's connecting with other people. Maybe it's reading. For me, I started knitting again because I was just watching TV and going crazy with my hands. I had to do something with my hands. Whatever it is that kind of keeps you sane. So I think giving yourself permission to take care of yourself. So self-care and compassion helps us to have the energy to be resilient. There is an important difference between self-management and self-control and resilience. Self-management is discipline. So there are things that we have to do. If you want your degree, you have to do your homework. If you don't want to go to jail, you have to pay your taxes, right? So there are things that we do because we have to. That's discipline, that's self-control. Resilience and grit and the kinds of things that we're talking about now have to do with something else. They have to do with something that makes you feel passionate and excited about something. So it's both. One is doing what we have to do and bucking up, washing your face in the morning, even if you're not going to see anybody, and doing what you have to do. And this is, where you work with your professors to pass your classes, figure out if you're going to take the pass-fail, figure out if you're going to get the grade, the things that we have to do. Resilience is the why. So if you're interested in all the back stuff, it's Simon Sinek who asks, what's your why? Why are you doing these things? Resilience has to do with passion. So to help yourself be adaptable and to be successful, you have to figure out why you're doing something. And that question might look like, why do I want this degree? What do I want to do with my education? Why do I want it? It's one thing to be disciplined and do what you have to do and check the boxes and get things in, and that's great. That's part of emotional intelligence. The other part is tapping into the passion that really motivates you and helps you to answer, why am I getting up in the morning and doing this thing that I don't really want to do? Because I have to, because I love it. It took me 40 years, guys, to figure out what that was for me. It certainly wasn't being a lawyer, although I did like helping people. For me, it was helping people to maximize what they are capable of. Empowering other people, helping to inspire them. And that's really what coaching is. And anybody who's sat in my classroom knows that that's how I teach. It's what is it for you that's going to make your life worth living? And now is really an important time to ask that question. And to tie it into what Julia and also Denise and Susan, anyone who's ever been out there in the job market will tell you, you're going to get asked that question. What are you passionate about? What do you care about, right? What's the thing that you don't ever want to stop talking about? And it's this for me, so I'll shut up. But, it's that, what do you really care about deeply? And that helps you to be resilient.
So I want to save a little bit of time for Q&A, but I think I'm going to kick off the Q&A by asking Professor Stefano and Julia, real quick, if you could just name like 1 or 2 resources, maybe Professor Stefano talk about more on the academic side, and then Julia more on the career side, that are available for students that are good during this time.
Resources in what regard? Like people resources for any issues they may be experiencing?
Yeah, specifically at Mercy College that they could
So
reach out
at Mercy College, you know, I see students every single day. So I always say, you know, come to your professors. You know, we're here to help you, and we're here to support our students be successful. That's what our job is, right? That's part of why we're here. So you know, that is, you know, the first stop that I would say that students should come to their faculty members. There's other resources in the, you know, accessibility office if there's issues with, you know, stress within this time and taking tests and things of that sort. That's a, you know, another resource here at Mercy College. But I say first stop is always your faculty members. Our faculty members are very, very concerned about student success and what they're going through during this time and this point in time, and we're here to help and support. So that would be my recommendation for first stop.
Awesome. Julia?
So there's a ton to do right now since the world is remote, not just us, which means that you can be using LinkedIn and putting in some of the companies you're interested in working in and hitting Mercy alum to see if any of our Mercy alum are there, seeing if there are events that these employers are hosting, many of whom are doing virtual events. They're in handshake, going into big interview. 2 words from this presentation, big interview. There are easy ways to practice and practice and practice and practice your interview skills online, virtually, at 3 in the morning, at 2 in the morning, in your pajamas. And the more you interview, the more you'll say, I can't wait for the next interview, because it's a chance to get to know someone and to chat with them about their background. This is the time to rev up and optimize your background so that when the horse is at the gate and we're waiting and we're waiting, and when that gate goes up, you are ready to interview. Not just sitting around and saying, oh, now I have to start preparing. You use the time now. Big interview is there, tap into it. All of the events that we're hosting virtually are in handshake. Don't email me and say, Julia, do you have any internships for me that you see? I'm not doing the work for you. There's too many of you. And it's not my job to search for jobs for you. It's my job to bring them in. And if you want to impress me so that I recommend you to employers and everyone else on this panel, show me what you've done. Do some work. Differentiate yourself. Say, I've done this and this. I've applied here and here. I've done these coffee chats, these networking events, but I'd like your help in calling this person that I see you know in LinkedIn because I applied for that job at that company and that person's in charge. Oh, that's easy for me to do. Bam, I'm happy to do that for you. See the difference? I'm not going to do the heavy lifting for you. You need to do it because the process of doing it is what's going to make you guys grow and stretch and then be able to say, this is how I landed the job, not Professor so-and-so or Julia Wexler or Gina landed this job for me. So go online. Everything is there. There's so much to do now that really will help
you.
Exactly.
Yeah, perfect. Cool. So if we could open it up to Q&A, students, again, feel free to unmute and ask a question, but also put the question in the chat if you want to.
This is your time. Feel free to unmute.
Hi. I hope everyone's doing okay during this like craziness. But I was wondering if there's any specific certifications or something like that that you should, because I was looking it up, because I know we're already getting Excel and Bloomberg, but if there was anything else that stands out on a resume that I should do, because it's not like there's much else to do right now. So something like that would stand out on a resume that I could do.
You're a finance major, correct?
Yeah, finance.
I can jump in with that. I would say LinkedIn has some free courses now that you can get LinkedIn certified. I would look in LinkedIn. I'm not too sure specifically what certificates are for finance students, but I was taking a look the other day and there's various certificates that are certified by LinkedIn that you can look into. I can also connect you to the finance club president. He is very active as well and can also direct you the right way as well.
And I also know.
I have a suggestion too.
Oh,
I just have a quick suggestion.
One more thing. Okay, Susan,
Go ahead. Go ahead, Victoria.
Okay, I would just say, Sam, and anybody, Tableau, you know, there are a lot of tools now that help you connect data. So anything data analytics that you're interested in or can play with is such a differentiator right now. And anything that connects data to storytelling and branding. So Tableau, for example, is something that you can play with, get certified in, and it connects how to make data understandable in presentations, in reports, things like that. So especially, and I just because I know a little bit about you, you know, that's you know, that communication aspect of connecting data analytics to finance, to even accounting, and Professor Stefano could speak to this, marketing, Professor Cooper, is a real big differentiator right now. And now you have the time. You have the time to play with it. Whereas when everything's crazy, just a thought. Go ahead, Esther.
So I was actually going to say the exact same thing. Anything that you can do right now to enhance your skills in analytics, Python, another one, right? You can start doing some, you know, investigation into Python. It's coding language, right? And you can probably start self-teaching a little bit. Python is the background of websites, of different types of materials that are out there. And if you can show that you made that initiative, wouldn't that be a great thing to say in an interview of, I had all this extra time on hand and I really wanted to self-teach myself about analytics a little bit. And so I learned a little bit about, you know, Tableau, I learned a little bit about Python, and I realized these are areas that could really enhance my future, enhance what I can give your company. And so I just kind of like jumped in on my own. And that says a lot about you. If you're, you know, have that intellectual curiosity and you're trying to push yourself into a direction where the world is going, which is analytics, and it's there already, but it's going further. So anything you can do in that nature, I think would really, really help you.
Yeah, the foundation of analytics too, the base is Excel. So if you are not certified in Excel, or your skills in Excel are, you know, at a basic level, really firming those skills up. I read 2 more articles yesterday about this, how important Excel is coming into organizations, and that it's a foundational skill that they basically expect. When you're coming into an accounting or finance job, you need to really have your hands around Excel. So if you're not Excel certified yet, there's online learning in Excel as well too, free, you know, types of online learning where you can, you know, actually be working on that as well too. And of course, we have our certification course here at Mercy College, but if you haven't gotten to that yet, that might be another thing that you could be working on.
Great. And I know from experience from taking a data class, I was aware that the certification is about $200. And Megan just said that right now for students, it's half off. And there's some really awesome free resources out there to get knowledgeable to pass the certification exam. So great stuff out there right now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great question. Anyone else?
Yeah. Professor Drogin was talking about how they ask you questions about passion. But would it be appropriate to talk about passion where it's not related to the field you're talking about? So for example, I really enjoy working on cars, but it's not something that I necessarily want to do every single day for the rest of my life. I want to go into the finance world, but I am also really interested in cars. What would be like an appropriate way to answer that? Because I don't want the interviewer to tell me then you should go work in the car industry.
Yeah, that is a great question, Jonathan. I would say frame it I don't know if you've heard of the STAR response, but this is real big in career services. I teach it. STAR. What is a situation, a task, an action that you took, and what are the results? And when you talk about your passion and you tell a story in the context of that framework, what you are doing is demonstrating a marketable asset about yourself. So let's say, for example, you were going to talk about the biggest challenge you ever had around your passion for cars. Maybe it was professional, you wanted to work in a certain shop or something like that, or maybe it was, a real, a project that you just knew was going to take a lifelong restoration or something like that, anything. And you talk about the situation you were presented with. Here's what it looked like. My task was to make this client happy, or to build it for my cousin, or to find these parts that were really hard, whatever it was. So what actions did you take to accomplish this? I researched everything. I had to learn how to do new things that I didn't know how to do before. I had to develop skills that I didn't have. I had to figure it out. I had to do it in a time crunch, whatever it was. And the result was boom, whatever it was. Now you are telling a story about something you're passionate about, and your passion comes through, your interest comes through. It doesn't have to be about finance. Anybody who's listening to you is going to say, wow, that young man had a problem. He identified what he needed to do. He took the actions he needed to do, and he fixed that problem. And in so doing, he demonstrated tenacity, ingenuity, critical thinking, problem solving, whatever it was. And so you've told a story about yourself that's memorable. Now you're, oh, that's the guy who likes cars. So now you're out of the stack of resumes. You've differentiated yourself with an interest and a passion that may overlap with someone on the other side of the table from you. You don't know, maybe they love cars too, right? So you've done a bunch of things. You've made yourself vivid. You've differentiated yourself. You've told a memorable story, and you've demonstrated marketable skills. So yeah, find the stories, frame them up in a STAR response, STAR. I'll put it in the chat, and that's how I would answer it. I would love to hear somebody across the table that I was interviewing.
I wanted to actually add to that too, Victoria. In fact, this is what employers are looking for when you actually go into interview. They'll ask you these broad questions, behavioral type questions. Tell me about a time when. And you can use a situation like that. You don't have to dig for a work situation or even something that happened in a classroom. It can be a personal situation. And lots of times that's the best type of situation to, as Victoria mentioned, is being able to let the person you're interviewing with, the interviewer, know a little bit more about who you are, and they remember those types of things, and you stand out like Victoria mentioned. So it's great advisement. And Jonathan, I love cars as well too. So that would be a very attractive conversation to me if I was your interviewer.
I want to add just one thing to that, Jonathan, which is go a little deeper, because they're going to say, why are you interested in cars? And you should have a little history, and just to say, kind of thought it was really cool that, Henry Ford or Chrysler paired off from Ford and developed his own business, and one went bankrupt and one invented the assembly line and paying it forward. I think what Tesla is doing is really interesting, because to have a battery powered car. So you can tie in your passion with cars to what's going on right now in business with the auto industry. And that's going to be a really compelling answer. Not that you're just, I like because they go fast. Talk about really the economic fundamentals of the auto industry a little bit. Dig in and learn a little bit more about it if you don't know, so that you're now showcasing more about your intelligence by way of your hobby. So it'll add to your effectiveness in the interview.
And I would just top that off at the very end. The cherry on the cake is finish it up with an emotional connection, right? Really show your passion. You can close it out and say, you know what? And I love working on those types of challenges. That's what I realized that really gets me going. And that's why I love working on cars, because it gives me challenges that I don't really know how to fix, but I have to figure it out. So that kind of closes it out for them of you're just a curious person who likes the challenge, likes being in the game, likes that whole push, and that says it to them. But just loop it around to the end with the cherry on top of the cake to close it out that way.
Okay, yeah, thank you. That was such great feedback. Thank you so much.
Great. Any last questions?
Hi, I have a question. So during this time, I'm having some difficulty choosing on whether I should either focus more on skills or practicing like self-care and having like a work-life balance. So my question is like, how do you find the balance between everything?
I'm going to start, if that's okay. I don't know, what year are you in, Cindy?
I'm a freshman.
Okay. So your job is to get the strongest GPA you can as a freshman. That's really all that you can be doing right now. You're probably not working, maybe you are, but your job as a freshman, first and foremost, is to get the best GPA that you can. That's what employers will want to see later on. That will start differentiating you right away if you can walk in next year as a sophomore when you start to interview, when this whole situation does resolve, and you can say, I have a blankety blank GPA that's very strong. So in my opinion, others can add, I would work really hard to get your GPA up and balance that then with taking a yoga class in maybe 20 minutes. That might be the only time you have, but this is your time to bring it and get the GPA up very, very strong, as opposed to have a great balanced and do nothing but work out and take walks and have a 1.9 GPA. So I would say your job is to have a strong GPA and balance it as best you can. You can ask Megan. That's what JP Morgan is looking for. So that would be my advice.
Thank you, Julia.
I would add to that, Cindy, give yourself permission to not be doing everything that you all could possibly be doing while in quarantine now. You know, everybody's telling you, oh, now's the time you have time to fill in the blanks. And boy, you could make a grocery list for yourself that could put you right over the edge into crazy land, okay? Take a deep breath. You know what? Take 3 deep breaths. Every time you have to, you know, you're going to start to say to yourself, oh my God, I have to, I could, I should. Stop. Take a deep breath. Like Julia said, you are in school. Your job right now is to get through this semester, getting the best grades you can, okay? I'm going to add another job to that. Check in with yourself and see how you're feeling about things, okay? Where am I when the time goes so fast that I don't even notice that it went by? I was really enjoying that. Were you reading? What were you reading? Were you watching something on Netflix? Fantastic. Whatever it is, start to check in with yourself, because this goes back to adaptability too, okay? You can't control the external. The only thing you can control is how you're reacting to it, okay? It's very easy to put a ton of pressure on yourself and a ton of shoulds on yourself right now. Pare it down to the essential. You are students. You are working to get the best grades you can. You're working to survive crazy circumstances, okay? Many of us are cooped up in our houses with family, with people 24/7 that, you know, like this was not what we chose or not optimal maybe, okay? Give yourself permission to not be, you know, a 10 out of 10 right now, okay? Focus on the most important thing. It's grades. It's a little bit of self-knowledge too. Understand what you're not liking, what you're liking, where you get a little tense, where you're happy, you know, start noticing, because that'll help you to be self-aware and adaptable as you move down the line, okay? But give yourself permission to take those deep breaths. Give yourself permission to not be doing every possible thing you could, okay? Survive. If you survive and you work on your grades, you've won, okay? Get through this semester, then we'll take a deep breath and regroup, all right?
Thank you, Professor Drogin.
You're welcome, Cindy, and all of you.
On that note, I think this was a really, really productive discussion. Thank you to our panelists for coming and speaking to us and giving us a lot of great knowledge about adaptability and how to move forward in these crazy times. Thank you for everyone who joined and stayed on. I know we went a little bit over. We really appreciate your participation. Anything else, Gina?
Yeah, thanks again for your time. It's very much valued. I will be emailing all of you students a quick survey and some resources. some TED Talks that Professor Drogin had recommended, and the PowerPoint as well, if you'd like to refer to it. But thank you again, Professor Drogin, Professor Susan, and Professor Stefano, as well as Julia, for taking some time of your busy days to come give our students some advice. We really appreciate it.
And thank you, Gina, for all the work that you do for our students. Unbelievable organizing and really caring about everyone and keeping this together and organizing these events. So thank you from everyone to Gina.
Yeah, and Megan too. Great.
Yes, and Megan.
Co-leader. Yes, absolutely. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Have
you.
a great one. Okay.
Bye.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Healthy.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.